Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the CMC Launchpad Seminar Series. My name is Martin Martinez. I'm happy to welcome you here today, and we have a really exciting topic on deck today, building your CMC roadmap, policies, controls, and documentation. So just a quick admin note, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A tab, which should be on the top of your screen, and then we'll get those answered to you in real time as part of the seminar. We are recording this, so we will send out a recording after this as well as the slide deck. Just a little bit of a background on CMC Launchpad. A couple of us came together, myself and Joe here at Aberrant and Leslie at CyberAdvisor, to really build something to sort through all the noise, complexity, and build a solid foundation to begin people on their CMC journey, which we can discuss that a little bit later. But right now, I want to turn it over to Leslie Weinstein, who is one of the foremost experts on CMC in the country and was there since its inception. So I will hand it over to her now. Leslie, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So as Martine mentioned, you guys can see my screen, right? I always feel out of sorts because I have two different screens. So if any time looks like I'm not talking about what you guys are seeing, let me know so I can fix myself. But like Martine said, we came together, Joe, Martine, and I have been working for the last couple months trying to figure out how to bring something to market that is going to be useful, but also achievable, because there's a lot of products out there, there's a lot of noise out there, there's a lot of kind of chaos and confusion, and it can get very expensive if you end up talking to the wrong folks. They may lead you down a path that's not necessarily as helpful. So we're here to try to cut through the noise and to help you guys make sense of the CMMC requirements. For those of you that don't know me, Leslie Weinstein, I've been in the Army for the last, I guess this year would be my 20 years, but I took some time off to go to law school. So I recently graduated from law school, and I plan to sit for the Maryland bar next month. So in the future that I can hopefully provide resources to the defense industrial base as an attorney, because I plan to practice in this space. So like Martine alluded to, the CMMC Launchpad, we'll talk a little bit more about what the actual offering is, but at the end of the day, it's a cyber GRC tool, some advisory services, as well as policy templates to help businesses figure out what's happening, what they need to do, and where they need to go. Just a recap about kind of where we are on the CMMC timeline. The CUI program has been around since 2010. DoD started implementing it into contracts back in 2016. The CMMC started being talked about in 2020, and then the final rule was published in late 2025, which has kind of led to this frenzy of activity, because there's these misperceptions that the CMMC is required today. Everybody has to do it now. If you haven't done it already, you're late. But it's a contractual obligation in defense contracts or within the supply chain. So it's not a requirement that reaches out and touches you necessarily. It's something that you're obligated through a defense contract. So as you can see, we are here. The DFARS clause has been published, so you may see solicitations with this requirement in it. So what do you need to do? The last session we had was on the requirements, the different levels, the different number of controls, and the assessment objectives, and understanding that. But understanding that is not enough. You have to figure out what you're doing and where you're going. And so today we are going to be talking about building a CMMC roadmap. The very first thing, and we'll go into each one of these steps in a lot more detail, but I just want to lay out the 5 steps that we're going to cover from a foundational level. And this applies to not just CMMC, but anything you're implementing. If you have to comply with some new regulation in like in Europe, if you have to implement this GDPR, or if you're going to do a SOC 2, anything that you're doing will follow these general steps. So the very first thing is workflow and scoping. For the CMMC, the requirements flow where the data flows. So being able to articulate clearly, specifically where your information, how it's coming into your environment, what you're doing with it, and where it's going out. That's the very first step, because that is where the requirements to protect data will lie. And you don't want to expand your scope of assessment too far. And then conversely, you don't want to leave anything out, because that will cause you to fail a third-party assessment if you don't know exactly where your data is going. The second step is a current state analysis. Starting with the end in mind, you have to figure out where you are, what you're starting from, understand the gaps in what you're required to do, and then figure out how to get from here to where you need to go. The next step is to strategize. The worst thing you can do is jump the gun and start buying products and services and putting them in your environment to solve problems, only to realize that they then create other problems down the line. So creating this holistic picture of what's happening and then developing a coherent strategy to get you to where you actually want to go. The next step is to start remediating, is to implement those solutions that you've decided are appropriate. And then the very last step is to reevaluate your environment. Have your remediations been successful? So we'll go in a little bit more detail first about the workflow and scoping. So at a very fundamental level, workflow and scoping, they very much go hand in hand. Basically, you're getting information either from the government or from a prime or from some other vendor that has a contract with the government. They're getting information and they're transmitting you CUI. The very first step is understanding, well, who is getting the CUI and how is it coming into your system? Are you getting emails? Are you going to a secure file transfer? Are you getting it in the mail, like in the postal service? Are you going and picking up a thumb drive somewhere? How are you getting the CUI in your environment? Like that is the most important first step. And a lot of my consulting engagements, when I ask these questions, the person leading the call often has no idea who's actually getting it and where it's coming from. They'll have some vague idea, but it takes extra time for them to go talk to the humans who are actually receiving it and using it to understand how it's coming in. So you have to understand how it's coming in and who it's coming into, and then you have to understand what are they doing with it, right? Are they keeping it on their laptop? Probably not. That's not really doing anything. They're probably sending it to other people within the organization. They might be sending it to some sort of OT environment, operational technology, where they're manufacturing or producing or fabricating, doing something with that CUI over here. They may be putting it into software applications where they're generating designs and concepts and things. And then some part of your organization may be transferring that CUI in some way to a third party, right? And you have to understand if there's a contract here, if you're sending CUI, there should be a contract in place where you're flowing the requirements down to this other business or entity because they need to receive your CUI and then they probably need to send it back to you. So you need to understand how they're sending it back and forth. Is it another secure file transfer? Is it an email? Is it being hand carried? Is it being printed? How are these, third parties communicating CUI to your company? And then also, how is your company sending it internally? Is there some sort of connection here? Are they sending it to the cloud? Is there a server somewhere? Like understanding where the CUI flows in your environment, and ultimately, how does the CUI leave your environment? How does it go back to the government? How does it go back to the higher level supplier? Are you sending an email? Are you doing a file transfer? So it seems very elementary, but if you haven't done this level of activity or exercise within your organization, everything else you do from here has the potential of being either wrong size, like it's not going to cover everything, or it's going to cover too much of your environment, and it's not going to be cost effective nor efficient. So in this diagram, I created, oh, nope, sorry. How do I get this? There we go. This ugly red line to highlight where the actual scope of the controls that need to be applied to this environment apply right here. From the moment you get the CUI, you have to have a secure way to access the information. You have to have a secure way to make sure that you're processing the information within your own environment. And I scoped out this third party, but I included this part because you have to understand how you're sending it to a third party. The third party, in theory, you're sending the obligation to them to protect it, so they'll have their own red circle over here. But everything inside this red circle is what we are scoping for our CMMC engage our CMMC requirements, your self-assessment, your third-party assessment, any activities that you're working towards is focused on this area. We have a webinar next week where we're going to focus on identifying and designating CUI, as well as like more granular details on scoping, because within your environment, you have to categorize each of your assets as either a CUI asset or as a risk managed asset. So we'll talk more about those specific things next week. But for this call, we're just going to be talking about how to build the high-level roadmap for your environment. So once you've done the workflow and scoping and you know exactly who, what, and how you're handling the CUI, the very next step is to do a current state analysis. So current state analysis, so I've highlighted just our part of the environment here. And down here, I've actually pulled in a screenshot from the Aberrant platform to explain how, as part of this current state analysis, you should be looking at your system security plan. The system security plan documents all of the security controls. It documents how you're implementing them. And then as part of this analysis, you should be documenting the extent to the extent to which all of those controls are implemented. Sometimes they are fully implemented and you're green, good to go. Sometimes they're partially implemented. Using the CMMC Level 2 assessment guide, they lay out all of the assessment objectives. There are 320 assessment objectives at CMMC Level 2. So going through each one of those 320, sorry, I'm looking at the screen over here because I have two screens and it's a little bigger. So as you can see, like this one security control has all of these assessment objectives. So as you're going through the assessment guide, the Aberrant platform actually has each one of these assessment objectives, and each one of these has a status as being met, not met, partially implemented, not applicable. And if any one of your assessment objectives are not fully implemented, you cannot give yourself credit for having this control fully implemented. And so you have to document it as a gap in your environment. And these are the gaps that we will be looking at holistically in order to strategize about where to fix first, next, and then last. Are there any questions? I know I talked really quickly, so I just want to give people a minute to type if they need to, but I will keep going and then just interrupt me, Martine, if there is a question. So strategizing the next step. So I'm using the Aberrant platform. There's no standard format for a system security plan. I've been using spreadsheets for years, but I figured I would at least use the tool that Aberrant has produced because it is it's very well suited for this activity, and it's why this platform was designed. So within the Aberrant platform, as you go through the self-assessment and you're marking these controls as not fully implemented, the NIST requirements, which is what the CMMC is based on, NIST requires that for every single gap, you have to have a POA&M in place, a plan of action with milestones. So within the Aberrant platform, you can actually create these POAMs as you go through to explain to yourself, to whomever, what the gap is. And then at the end, however many gaps you have, you can click into those to see everything that you're missing, right? Like this is the information that you should be looking at holistically to develop that next step. Because if you're looking at each gap as an individual singular problem, you're more likely to purchase a singular individual solution, and it becomes unwieldy and very expensive to keep purchasing independent solutions. I see that there's a hand up. Are we able to unmute Pratish to let him ask a question?
Hey, Pratish, will you be able to use the Q&A feature?
Are you able to unmute? I gave you microphone access if you can hear me, or if you're able to do that. Okay, I don't want to have dead air, but if he types the question, let me know and I'll go back. So just understanding that the issues you identify you can find a solution that solves multiple problems. You don't have to purchase individual products or tools to solve just one problem. So that's why I advocate for waiting until after identifying all of the gaps, that's when you start to strategize, because you don't want to jump the gun and realize that you have more problems that you could have found a better solution for if you had started before you understood the whole scope of the problems.
Pratish had a question. His question was, does the SSP, is it software that we have to order, or is it part of a gap analysis?
So as part of the CMMC Launchpad, our bundled offering, so Aberrant is this platform tool. It's a software-based SaaS cyber GRC tool. I know Joe doesn't like calling it a cyber GRC tool. I like the term GRC. That is software. Our packaged offering also includes 24 hours of advisory services provided by me, as well as a set of like 20 something policies that have been templates. I've removed the names of companies that I've worked with to create these policies for, but we have all of these policies built into the platform that are mapped to the NIST framework, as well as 24 hours of my time to help your company or help whomever needs it, either to put all of the policies in place or to do a gap assessment or to help figure out the workflow, help designate CUI or identify what CUI looks like. So it's really all three of these things. Aberrant is a separate platform, separate from me. I'm just the person talking, and then the policies, if you need them. A lot of companies already have policies, but maybe they're not totally NIST aligned, and we can pull language from the stuff that I have and add them to what you have. So it's really all three of those different things packaged together. But the SSP in general, like the NIST requirement, the CMMC requirement, there's no standard SSP format requirement. There's just requirements for the contents of the system security plan. The content requirement for the system security plan is to identify the system scope and environments, like the scoping exercise and this workflow, making sure that you've accounted for every single thing within that information environment. The next requirement is a list of all of the security controls that are applicable. Then you have to describe how they're implemented, and then you have to describe the extent to which they're implemented. Those are the fundamental requirements for a system security plan. They don't have to exist in a platform. They can exist in Excel or a Word document. But this Aberrant GRC is a platform that you can store your system security plan, as well as conduct a gap assessment and all sorts of other things that are necessary for complying with the CMMC. Okay, so, and this is in the GRC platform, the Aberrant platform. If you mark a control is not implemented, you have to create a POA&M. This box pops up to create a POA&M, and then after you create the POA&M, you can go and review all of these open issues and track their remediation. And you can task it to people and add metrics and timelines and add evidence and all sorts of things to make sure that as you close them out, you're updating and giving yourself credit that these things have been remediated. All right, so the bulk of the effort here is potentially going to be in the remediation, right? Like, it's one thing to know where you're deficient, and it's another thing to actually fix those deficiencies, and it's a multi-step process. But not all controls have to be technical. A lot of cyber people seem to want to tell you that you have to do everything in a tool, everything has to be automated, or everything has to be technically controlled, and that's not required for NIST compliance, and it's not required for CMMC compliance. I imagine different assessors will have different opinions, but at the end of the day, the requirement is to meet the security assessment objectives. This is the objective of the control. If you want to implement a Microsoft, if you want to point to a Microsoft Active Directory as your identifying authorized users, you can do that, but you can also create a policy. And when I say policy, I mean a paper document that applies to your company, and not a policy as in a configuration for a cyber tool. So don't want to create confusion. by saying policy in a paper term, but policy as a control is absolutely appropriate in some ways. It does not have to be a technical implementation. However, whatever you're doing to implement a security assessment objective, it has to exist in writing somewhere. You have to document it in the system security plan. You have to describe how it's implemented. And even if you're using your system security plan and a technical tool to implement a security requirement, you should still be addressing it in the policy just so that there is that redundancy, but also if somebody goes to your, security paper policy documentation, they'll understand that, yes, this business has a requirement to make sure that, access is limited to authorized users. And then here in your system security plan, you're defining either what an authorized user is. And so by the nature of an employee, they would qualify as an authorized user. Or conversely, if you're using Active Directory, you can use your Active Directory as the source of the list of authorized users. Right. So there's various ways to implement every single security control, and they're not all going to look the same. Even companies that have the same Microsoft licenses may have different ways of implementing the controls or different ways of documenting it. So that's why having these policy templates that I've used in practice for actual client engagements and also drafted for a generic company with generic licenses for different products, because it's easier to look to see how other people who have described how they're using the tools to see if this is applicable for your company. And if yes, great. If not, how can we tweak it to make it work for your company? Because putting in controls, workflows, technical controls, policies, requirements for your employees, if it doesn't make sense for your company, it's not probably going to be followed. And then that, kind of blows up the whole reason for putting these controls in place. So the next step after you identify all of the gaps that you're missing, all of the, maybe you don't have MFA, or maybe you don't have FIPS encryption, or maybe you don't have anything and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to go buy some tools. I need to go buy some software and products and do things. Again, you should be evaluating the vendors, not just the vendors. I put these cute little icons to represent vendors. Like you have to you evaluate the vendor themselves as a company, as well as evaluating the tools that they have to offer and or the software or technology that they're offering you. You should be evaluating the vendor, at least 2 vendors if you're considering a product, because you want to see, well, one, for pricing, but 2, is one vendor going to provide more coverage for various gaps than the other one? Or is there some sort of very specific tool that you really want? And making sure that fits into your environment, and doing a security review of that product to make sure that they're going to provide you that documentation to provide assurance that they're actually going to provide the coverage for the controls that you're looking for. And so only after evaluating the vendor and their products and services, then you can start purchasing these products and services and tools. And as you purchase them, you implement them into your environment, but you're also going back and you're updating your system security plan to make sure that as it's implemented, you're documenting. It's much harder to go back after the fact and kind of dig through all the configuration settings to make sure that the configuration settings meet the requirements. Whereas if you're building it and implementing it and documenting and also updating your paper policies at the same time, it makes it a whole lot easier than having to go back through and almost doing like a post-mortem. Okay, what are we doing? How are we doing this? Oh no, where's this configuration, or who said it? It's doing it all kind of like in this cyclical process where you're implementing, updating, writing it, like documenting how it's going to work, and then going back through to make sure that it's all kind of being implemented in the way that you think it is. Which brings me back to this last step. So after you've purchased all of these tools, you've implemented the tools, you've updated the documentation, you put the pens down and you take a step back, and then somebody who did not implement the tools, either a third party or somebody, from compliance or some other part of your organization, should be the one to come in and do this reevaluation to make sure that everything that you've purchased and put in place is operating as you expect, and that it's achieving the desired effects that you're hoping to have. And the desired effects should be achieving the assessment objectives. And as you're doing these, reevaluations, that you're going back in and updating the POAMs to make sure that these remediations have in fact closed those gaps and have not introduced new gaps. And if you're introducing new gaps, that's okay. It's an iterative process, but you make sure that you identify those gaps. So one of the main differences between the CMMC stuff and NIST 800-171 is that with NIST 800-171 and this self-assessment and the SPURS score, there's no requirement to have 100%. The DoD has not put out a threshold or mandated a certain score. They've just said you have to do NIST and do an assessment and tell us what your score is. In theory, you could have no controls applied and still claim that you're compliant with NIST 800-171 as long as you have a POAM in place to fix all of those gaps. You just have to document it. It feels like with NIST, the exercise is the point more so than achieving 100% compliance all of the time. The CMMC, on the other hand, to get that final CMMC level 2, whether it's a self or a third party, to get the full credit, you have to have all of the controls in place. They do allow for, I think it's called a provisional or some sort of interim CMMC assessment standing, but you have to close out your gaps within 180 days. So it's not a full total credit CMMC, but even the gaps that you're allowed to have with that is there's only a few controls that you're allowed to have gaps for. They're very explicit about which ones you can have gaps. So if you have any of the ones that cannot have gaps, you cannot claim CMMC compliance. However, you could claim NIST 800-171 compliance because in that regard, they're not the same. So I know we've already touched on it briefly, but I do want to talk more about what the CMMC Launchpad is offering. So like I mentioned earlier, our CMMC Launchpad offering is a bundled I don't say solution because that makes it sound like it's the answer to your problems, because you will always have problems and we can't solve them all. But we brought together the Aberrant tool, like 1-year license for the Aberrant tool, plus 24 hours of my consulting service, or if we run out of time and everybody has demand, we have other folks in our ecosystem that we trust to provide these types of services. And then within the Cyber GRC platform, within Aberrant, we have a whole bunch of policy templates that I created in partnership with USPAE. They asked me to create these templates, one for them because they wanted to have these policies as well, but then how can they help industry by making these available for the defense industrial base. So we packaged these together for $10,000. $10,000 is incredibly below, like very cheap compared to the rest of the market. We decided that $10,000, it's enough for us to, not give this away for free because this is our job and, we have to put food on the table, but we also wanted to make it available to these small businesses across the defense industrial base who absolutely need these types of services and help. But if they had to go purchase all of these things on their own, they'd be spending tens of thousands of dollars. And we're not trying to make this unachievable, but we also want to convey that what we're providing is of use and it is high quality, even at this low price point, because we are all, Martine, Joe, and I are veterans. We are here to help serve the defense industrial base. So we're trying to make this an achievable price point. And that's it. I talk very, very quickly. I apologize. So I will pause here for a minute to see if there's any more questions, or if Joe or Martine want to, if I missed anything in any of this. Oh, Joshua has a question. I don't know. Okay, Joshua, I allowed your mic also. Are you able to unmute?
In the event that the unmute doesn't work, there's a Q&A above that if you click into that, you can type out the question and then we'll read it aloud. Apologies for the limitations of Office 365.
While we wait for that, I want to highlight some of our upcoming events. So On Tuesday next week, we'll be talking about how to identify CUI and defining the CMMC scope with more granularity. Identifying CUI is one of my fortes, I suppose. I spent 2 years at the Defense Intelligence Agency declassifying everything that came out of Guantanamo Bay. So we would have to bring all of these documents and evidence from the top secret all the way down to public release level. So being able to identify equities within data and clearly articulating what that data looks like within your environment is something that I've done by practice and something that I've done with a lot of defense contractors to help them with that very first step of identifying workflow. Because if you cannot identify CUI, then it's really hard to figure out where the CUI flows with your environment. And then next Thursday, instead of like a structured webinar, we're inviting anybody who wants to come and drop in to hang out with us and ask us random questions or commiserate with each other or talk about common problems to see if we can come up with some solutions. So I think I heard Joshua.
Yeah,
Yeah.
David's on
Okay.
Thanks, Leslie. Really nice presentation. Just want to, I guess, highlight, there are different levels, right?
Mhm.
And your approach and your GRC tool can be used for either levels 1 or 2, correct?
That's correct.
Correct.
Yeah. And the amount of work for a level 1 that your GRC tool can help with is pretty sufficient, I would think.
Yeah, it's so the thing that the tool really provides is if so like the compliance to topology is constantly shifting, and as a result you want to have the systematized so that you aren't finding yourself going and doing rework. Like in terms of opportunity cost, like your labor and your primary focus should be on your core product. And so if you find yourself futzing with like things like compliance and security and stuff like that, that's not an efficient use of your time. So what we try to do is we try to build something that can fit your business, whether that's your processes or your compliance requirements. So this works with everything. And but yeah, so for like, for just doing a CMMC level 1, you could do that in Word, in Excel. But I think if you have other things and stuff that you need to be concerned about, then it does
Right.
make sense to use a tool.
Right. Okay, thanks.
That's a great question.
Oh,
And
one other thing.
yeah.
Next Thursday, are you serving drinks during your office hours?
You're
Just
free to
I mean,
drink if
you
you
can
want.
watch us drink.
Yeah. I should note too, so we have like info at launchpadcmmc.com. You may have like technical questions about a control. You might have questions about how does someone implement this particular controller? What's the best practice for doing this? And it's like feel free to ask. If we can answer those questions out of band, and we're happy to do so for free. So like what really launched CMMC Launchpad is two things. It's a bundled product offering for SMBs because we believe there's a national defense imperative, and we also believe that the small, medium-sized DIB firms or contractors are the foundation of our defense innovation. And you see that in Ukraine, like basically with Radio Shack off the shelf parts, they basically have blunted one of the largest militaries in the world. And it's like, we want to do anything we can to support that. So there's the information behind this, and then the bundle of products or whatever that we put together that we believe will provide you with enough information so that you have the ability to budget and scope everything. So like, really like, we want you to avail yourself of everything or whatever makes sense for you. And, so if you have questions out of band and stuff, like I said, we're happy to answer those.
Yeah, or just come commiserate next Thursday and kvetch about the problems that you're facing and how they come up with creative ways to solve them. Because not all controls have to be technical, and sometimes it's just there's a really hard problem to solve, and a technical solution may not be it. So coming up with creative workarounds, it's something I've done. I worked at Deloitte for a couple of years, helping large primes with this problem as well. I do prefer working with smalls, but I have experience working in all sorts of different types of enterprises, and everybody does this differently. So it's, no skin off our back to answer these questions, because we are here because we enjoy doing this. So don't hesitate to ask questions, but also if you have topic ideas for what you would want to see presented. I have a friend of mine who's a government contracts attorney, who's going to come talk in a couple weeks about the False Claims Act and other legal liabilities for non-compliance. And he's also a government contracts attorney. This is what he does for a living. So having these other questions that may arise involving GovCon, obviously it overlaps with the CMMC because of the DFARS clause, but there's broader issues that defense contractors have to worry about, which is why I went to law school, which is why I know GovCon attorneys. But if there's other niche topics that you would want a speaker in those areas to come from, we can find those kinds of people and bring them to this environment as well. So that's all I had prepared. So unless other people have questions, I think we could probably give some time back to everybody.
Thanks. It was great. I appreciate it. Look forward to learning more.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. That was awesome.
Martine, do you want to wrap it up and I'll stop sharing?
Yeah, no, just one, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming today. And Leslie, thank you for presenting. It was a great topic. Just as it was already mentioned, so I won't cover it too much, but why we put the Launchpad together, it's like really two components. One is like the set of like resources, which are, free. So this seminar series is part of it. We also have our website hosts a repository of information that you can leverage to kind of start you on your CMMC journey. So, points you to potential, financial resources, legal resources, things of that nature, which you might not be considering, to kind of create like a one-stop shop for all of your CMMC questions. And on the other side, we work together to create this bundle, which will get you on the path to like a real security solution to really support kind of national security and the intent behind CMMC, but do it in a very efficient way where we're saving on costs, and kind of how our kind of mission is to really support defense by supporting the innovation ecosystem that are really SMBs are really driving. So thank you all for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you all on future events. Everyone have a good afternoon. Bye.
You as well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.